yeah.
I don't.
Well,
now, when you say you're gonna take my phone, now I feel like you're blaming me.
no, we haven't.
The night was alive with music and laughter, and for 20-year-old Keeley Bunker, it felt like the perfect way to celebrate her birthday, just 2 days after turning 20 on September 7th, 2019. She stood in the crowd at the O2 Academy in Birmingham, watching her favorite rapper H perform on stage. The excitement in her eyes was unmistakable. Days before the concert, she had tweeted with innocent hope, "Only thing keeping me going is seeing H on Wednesday. Hopefully he'll see me and we'll get married." It was the kind of playful dream that young people carry in their hearts, harmless and full of life. Keeley wasn't alone that night. Beside her stood her best friend Monique Reagan, someone who had been part of her world in Tamworth, Staffordshire. The two young women sang along to every song, their voices mixing with hundreds of others in the packed venue. But there was a third person in their group that evening, someone who had been part of Keeley's life since they were children sharing playgrounds and school corridors. Wesley Street had known Keeley since their days in infant school, and though they weren't the closest of friends, their friendship had endured through the years. It was this long history, this sense of familiarity and trust, that would make what happened next so devastating. Born on September 7th, 1999, Keeley had grown up as the kind of daughter every parent dreams of having. Her mother, Debbie, would later describe her as precious and beautiful, words that seemed too small to capture the vibrant soul that Keeley was. Her sister saw her as one of the most caring and beautiful souls this earth had ever seen. These weren't just loving words of family grieving a loss. They were the truth about a young woman who had spent her 20 years on earth spreading kindness wherever she went. Keeley was a fighter, someone who had worked her way through life's challenges with determination and grace. She had earned her degree and set her sights on becoming a teacher, drawn to the idea of shaping young minds and making a difference in children's lives. The very next morning after the concert, she had a job interview scheduled for a position as an assistant teacher. It was the kind of opportunity she had been working toward for years, a stepping stone toward her dream career. She had prepared for it, probably chosen her outfit the night before, and felt that mixture of nerves and excitement that comes with knowing you're about to take the next big step in your life. As the concert ended and the lights came up in the venue, the three friends made their way out into Birmingham night. The energy from the show was still buzzing through their bodies as they headed to the new street station to meet up before continuing their celebration. Wesley had suggested they extend the night, and Keeley, still high on excitement of the concert and her recent birthday, agreed readily. They made their way to a nightclub where the music continued and the drinks flowed freely. Time seemed to slip away as it does on nights when you're young and carefree. The club was crowded, the music loud, and the three friends danced and laughed into the early hours of morning. It was 2:40 a.m. when they finally decided to call a night. Outside the club, the September air was cool against their flushed faces as they waited for a taxi to take them back to Tamworth, where they all lived. The taxi ride was probably filled with the kind of tired, happy chatter that follows a good night out. They were heading home to familiar streets, to beds where they could sleep off the alcohol and wake up to Saturday morning with nothing more serious to worry about than hangovers. When the taxi reached their destination in Tamworth, Keeley faced a decision that would haunt everyone who loved her for the rest of their lives. Her house was just a short walk away from where they had gotten out of the taxi. It should have been a simple, safe journey home through streets she had walked countless times before. But Monique, her best friend who knew her so well, felt a nagging worry in the pit of her stomach. Something about the late hour, about the darkness, about the vulnerability of a young woman walking alone, made her speak up. "Stay the night," she urged Keeley. "Don't walk home alone." But Keeley had that interview in the morning, the one she had been looking forward to for weeks. She had plans, responsibilities, a future she was eager to step into. "I've got Wes," she told Monique, gesturing toward Wesley. "He'll walk me back. It'll be fine." Those words would echo in Monique's mind forever after. The trust in Keeley's voice, the complete confidence she had in someone she had known since childhood. The way she said it would be fine, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Wesley nodded, agreeing to walk Keeley home. To everyone watching, it seemed like the perfect solution. Here was a young man who had known Keeley for years, someone from their shared childhood, someone who could be trusted to see her safely to her door. Monique said goodbye, probably with a hug and plans to talk the next day about the interview and how the night had gone. She watched as Keeley and Wesley disappeared into the darkness, walking toward Keeley's house through quiet streets of Tamworth. That was the last time Monique would ever see her best friend alive. Morning came, and with it, the harsh reality that something was terribly wrong. Keeley didn't show up for her interview. For someone who had been so excited about the opportunity, who had planned her evening around getting home in time to prepare, this absence was completely out of character. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Texts went unanswered. The silence grew more deafening with each passing hour. By 5:30 p.m., Keeley's father couldn't ignore his growing panic any longer. He filed a missing persons report with the police, his voice probably shaking as he described his daughter, gave them her details, and tried to explain that this wasn't like her. The police began their investigation immediately, reaching out to friends and family, trying to piece together Keeley's last known movements. It didn't take long for them to identify Wesley as the last person to have seen Keeley alive. When they brought him in for questioning, he seemed helpful, even eager to assist in finding his missing friend. He told them a straightforward story. He had walked with Keeley until they reached a telephone box near his home, and then they had parted ways. He had left her there, he claimed, to walk the remaining distance to her house alone. When the officers asked him to show them exactly where this had happened, Wesley didn't hesitate. He led them through the streets, pointing out the route they had taken, showing them the precise spot where he said he had last seen Keeley. To the investigating officers, Wesley appeared to be everything you would want in a witness. He was cooperative, detailed, and seemed genuinely concerned about his missing friend. They thanked him for his help and let him go, turning their attention to other leads and possibilities. But even as Wesley walked away from that first police interview, Keeley's family and friends continued their desperate search through the streets of Tamworth. It was Keeley's uncle, Jason Brown, who made the discovery that would shatter everything. At 9 p.m., as part of the search party combing through local areas, he found himself at Wigginton Park. Something drew him toward the pond. Perhaps just the thoroughness of someone who loved Keeley enough to look everywhere, no matter how unlikely. What he saw in the water would be burned into his memory forever. Keeley's body was submerged in the pond, her clothes removed, floating face down in the dark water. Around her neck were the unmistakable marks of strangulation, evidence of a struggle, of someone fighting for their life in their final moments. The sight was so horrific that it took a moment for the reality to sink in. This vibrant young woman, who just hours before had been laughing and dancing and planning for her future, was gone. Wesley immediately became the prime suspect. The police arrested him, and this time, the questioning was very different. Gone was a helpful witness. Now he was a suspect in the murder of someone who had trusted him completely. The interrogation rooms at the police station became the setting for a psychological battle between Wesley and the officers who were determined to uncover the truth. In the recorded interviews, Wesley's demeanor shifted dramatically from his earlier cooperation. He seemed more concerned about how the investigation would affect him than about the fact that Keeley was dead. "I feel like you're blaming me," he complained to the officers, more worried about them looking through his Google searches than helping police understand what had happened to his missing friend. There was a self-centeredness to his responses that didn't match the gravity of the situation, a focus on his own comfort and reputation, rather than on the loss of a young life. But Wesley's carefully constructed story began to fall apart as the investigation deepened. His mobile phone, which he had been so worried about the police examining, told a very different tale than the one he had shared. The GPS data showed that he had returned to a location where Keeley's body was found not once, but 7 times on the day she died. 7 separate trips to the scene of the murder, each one a piece of evidence that contradicted his claim that he had simply walked her partway home and then gone about his normal day. When confronted with this information, Wesley tried to explain away, but his explanations became increasingly desperate and contradictory. CCTV footage from around Tamworth Rugby Club showed him and Keeley together much later than the time he had claimed to have left her at the telephone box. The electronic trail of evidence was building an undeniable timeline that exposed his lies. Physical evidence soon joined the digital proof of his guilt. Wesley's bank card was discovered in the park, where Keeley's body had been found. His jacket was there too, items that should have been with him if his story about parting ways early in the evening was true. Most damning of all, the post-mortem examination of Keeley's body revealed Wesley's DNA. Physical proof of contact that went far beyond a simple goodbye between childhood friends. Faced with this overwhelming evidence, Wesley was charged with the sexual assault and murder of Keeley. But even as he sat in custody awaiting trial, he continued to weave new versions of events, each one designed to minimize his responsibility while acknowledging pieces of evidence that could no longer be denied. Initially, during the trial, Wesley maintained his innocence with the kind of confidence that might have been convincing if not for the mountain of evidence against him. He claimed that alcohol had confused his memory, that he had been so drunk that night that he had mixed up the details of how the evening had unfolded. He painted himself as a confused young man who had simply made mistakes in his recollection. Someone whose friendship with Keeley was innocent and whose only crime was having a poor memory. He promised the court that when he had left Keeley that night, she had been happy, that she had seemed content and safe. 110% happy, he insisted, as if repeating enough times would make it true, as if his certainty about her emotional state could somehow erase the reality of what had happened to her later. But as the trial progressed and more evidence was presented, Wesley's story shifted again. Faced with DNA evidence that couldn't be explained away by a casual goodbye, he changed his account entirely. Now he claimed that Keeley's death had been accidental, the result of what he described as consensual sex that had gone wrong. He painted a picture of flirtation and mutual attraction, claiming that Keeley had teased him as they walked home together, leading to a moment of passion in the park that had ended in tragedy. This new version of events was as carefully crafted as his previous lies, designed to acknowledge the physical evidence while still portraying himself as a victim of circumstances rather than a predator. He described how they had ended up in the park together, how what started as consensual intimacy had somehow resulted in Keeley's death during what he claimed was rough but consensual sex. It was a defense strategy that sought to transform rape and murder into a tragic accident between 2 willing participants. The absurdity of this claim became clear when Wesley tried to explain his behavior after Keeley's supposed accidental death. He described returning to the park multiple times throughout the day, not to call for help or report the accident, but to cover Keeley's body with branches and debris. He spoke of these trips as if they were acts of care, as if hiding a body and attempting to conceal evidence of death were the natural responses of someone dealing with a tragic accident. When asked why he hadn't immediately called for help, why he hadn't told the truth to police and to Keeley's desperate family when they were searching for her, Wesley offered an explanation that revealed the true nature of his character. I didn't know how to act and explain to other people how she died because I felt embarrassed of myself and very scared to explain to the police, everyone, my mom and dad. Even in his supposed confession, Wesley made it about himself, about his embarrassment and fear, rather than about the young woman whose life he had taken. The prosecution presented evidence that painted a very different picture of what had happened that night. Rather than the mutual seduction Wesley described, the evidence showed a calculated predator who had manipulated the situation from the beginning as they walked home together. Wesley had persuaded Keeley to take a detour toward the rugby club, claiming he wanted to stop for a smoke. It was a small lie, the kind that might not raise suspicions from someone who trusted him, but it was a first step in leading Keeley away from safety and toward the isolated park where he could attack her without witnesses. Once in the park, there was no seduction, no mutual passion. Instead, Wesley had forced himself on Keeley, overpowering her with his larger size and strength. The marks on her neck told the story of her final moments. She had fought desperately for her life as Wesley held her in a chokehold, struggling for freedom until her strength gave out. The prosecution made it clear that this was not a death that could occur in seconds, not the result of passion gone wrong, but a sustained attack that would have taken minutes to complete. After murdering Keeley, Wesley had carried her body to pond, stripping away her clothes and submerging her in the water before covering her with branches in an attempt to hide his crime. Then he walked home, cleaned himself up, and prepared to lie to everyone who would ask about Keeley's whereabouts. It was a level of calculation and coldness that spoke to a mind capable of not just murder, but the methodical steps needed to try to cover it up. The evidence presented to the jury was comprehensive and damning. But even before the sentencing phase began, more disturbing revelations about Wesley came to light. As news of the trial spread through media outlets, it triggered responses from other young women who recognized something familiar in the reports about Wesley's crime. 3 women found the courage to come forward, each carrying the burden of their own encounters with Wesley that had left them traumatized and ashamed. The pattern they revealed was chilling in its consistency. In 2015, Wesley had raped and sexually assaulted a 16-year-old girl. In 2017, his victim was a 15-year-old girl. And just months before Keeley's death, he had raped another 20-year-old woman. Each attack followed a similar pattern. Wesley would use his familiarity with the victims, his reputation as someone who was well-liked and trusted, to put them in situations where they were vulnerable to his attacks. The courage it took for these women to come forward cannot be overstated. One of them told the court that she had thought she would never get over what Wesley had done to her, that she had fought against sickening thoughts that had almost overwhelmed her sense of self. Another shared her fear telling anyone about the attack because of how ashamed she felt, and how hearing about Keeley's case had finally given her the strength to speak up. After Wesley attacked me, I was scared to tell anyone, one survivor testified. However, looking back, if something made you physically sick in your stomach, it is definitely not okay. The 3rd survivor shared how she had blamed herself for what happened because she had gone to Wesley's house, trapped in the kind of self-doubt that predators rely on to keep their victims silent. It wasn't until I heard the sad news concerning Keeley that I found the courage to tell someone. It was at that point that I felt the full force of what had happened to me. But by that time, I had already dealt with my grief in what I feel is a bad way. Hannah Sway, the lead prosecutor, described Wesley's crimes as representing a clear pattern of predatory behavior. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment attack, she explained to the court. It was a pattern of behavior over a significant amount of time. She described Wesley as someone who had learned to take what he wanted without any regard for the consequences his actions had on others. Someone who had perfected the art of appearing harmless while harboring dangerous intentions. What made Wesley particularly dangerous, according to the prosecution, was his ability to blend in, to appear as the kind of young man that parents would trust with their daughters. His innocent appearance and friendly demeanor had made his victims less wary of him, allowing him to get close enough to attack. It's easy to have a stereotypical image of a perpetrator, Detective Inspector Cheryl Hannon observed. But what we often do not think about is a young lad who is popular, who has many friends, who is well known and liked. Detective Inspector Hannon, who served as a senior investigating officer on Keeley's case, had seen enough predators to recognize a particular type of evil that Wesley represented. She described him as devious and manipulating, someone whose arrogance had been on full display even during the investigation. His behavior during the search for Keeley, his complaints about being blamed while knowing exactly where her body lay, demonstrated a callousness that went beyond typical criminal behavior. The audacity in his arrogance therein playing the martyr as to why people were blaming me when I left her at that phone box, knowing full well where she was and what he'd done. Detective Inspector Hannon reflected the efforts he'd gone to concealing it, to delay people finding her if ever. Her friend, as did Keeley, trusted him to walk her home that night, and there's only Wesley to blame that she didn't make it home. The detective's words captured the essence of betrayal that made this crime so particularly heinous. Wesley hadn't been a stranger lurking in shadows or a random predator who had spotted an opportunity. He had been someone Keeley knew and trusted. Someone whose offer to walk her home had seemed like protection rather than the setup for an attack. He was obviously trusted by Keeley. He was trusted to walk her home that night. He has manipulated a situation where he has preyed upon her and ultimately raped and murdered her. Even after committing murder, Wesley had continued his manipulation, inserting himself into the center of the investigation and lying repeatedly to police, to Keeley's family, and to her friends. He had looked Keeley's parents in the eye and told them that their daughter had been safe when he last saw her, knowing that her body was hidden in a park pond just miles away. As evidence mounted against him, he had crafted new lies to fit each revelation, showing a flexibility with the truth that spoke to years of practice in deception. When the judge finally handed down Wesley's sentence, the weight of his crimes was reflected in the severity of the punishment. Wesley Street was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 30 years. Mr. Justice Jeremy Baker described Wesley's actions as part of a carefully crafted scheme of lies following his crime, tailored to fit the evidence as it emerged. During the sentencing, the judge spoke directly about the magnitude of what Wesley had taken from the world. He had cut short the beautiful life of a young woman who had dreamed of educating children, someone who had wanted to spend her life helping others learn and grow. Keeley had lost the opportunity to fulfill her life's ambition, to make the difference in young lives that had motivated her to pursue teaching in the first place. But the loss extended far beyond Keeley herself. Her family had lost a beloved daughter, sister, and niece. Her friends had lost someone who had brought joy and caring into their lives. The students she might have taught would never benefit from her enthusiasm and kindness. The children she might have had would never be born. The ripple effects of Wesley's crime would continue for generations, touching lives that would never even know what they had lost. Keeley's mother, Debbie, spoke for the family during the sentencing, her words carrying the weight of a grief that would never fully heal. As Keeley's family, the outcome of this trial will never be enough in terms of justice, she said. Keeley was the kindest, most caring, innocent young lady you could ever meet, and was only just starting out in her life. Such is the hell we feel. We are incapable of showing any forgiveness. These words reflected not just the depth of the family's loss, but the particular cruelty of having their loved one taken by someone who had been welcomed into their lives, someone who had shared birthday celebrations and childhood memories with Keeley. The betrayal was almost as devastating as the murder itself. The knowledge that they had trusted someone who had been planning to harm the person they loved most. The case of Keeley Bunker serves as a stark reminder that evil often wears a familiar face. Wesley Street wasn't the shadowy stranger that parents warned their children about. He was a childhood friend, the one who seemed safe, the one who offered protection. He had spent years building a reputation as someone who could be trusted, all while harboring intentions that were anything but innocent. For young people, particularly young women, Keeley's story offers both a warning and a tragedy. The safety measures that she and her friends thought they were taking that night, having someone walk her home, choosing a companion she had known for years, proved inadequate against someone who had spent those same years learning how to exploit the trust of others. The very qualities that should have made Wesley safe, his familiarity, his long history with Keeley, his apparent willingness to help, were the tools he used to isolate and attack her. The investigation into Wesley's crimes revealed that Keeley was not his first victim, just his most visible one. The three other women who came forward painted a picture of a young man who had been perfecting his predatory skills for years, learning from each attack how to better manipulate and control his victims. How many others might there have been who never found the courage to speak up? How many young women had encountered Wesley and walked away with trauma they carried in silence? Detective Inspector Hannon's observation about the non-stereotypical nature of Wesley's appearance highlights one of the most dangerous aspects of predatory behavior. Society's image of dangerous men often focuses on obvious threats. The stranger in the parking lot, the suspicious figure lurking in shadows. But the reality is that most attacks on women come from people they know, people who have worked to earn their trust specifically for the purpose of exploiting it. Wesley's ability to maintain friendships, to be well-liked and popular, to present himself as helpful and caring, were not separate from his predatory nature. They were essential parts of it. He had learned that the best way to access victims was to be seen as safe, to be the kind of person that friends would recommend and parents would approve of. His social skills were weapons, carefully honed and deliberately deployed. The technology that ultimately helped convict Wesley, the GPS data from his phone, the CCTV footage, the digital trail of his movements, also serves as a reminder of how predators adapt to modern times. Wesley might have thought he could control the narrative of what happened that night, but he couldn't control the electronic evidence that documented his real movements and actions. In some ways, technology is making it harder for criminals to escape justice, but it's also requiring law enforcement to become more sophisticated in gathering and analyzing digital evidence. The courage shown by the 3 additional victims who came forward during Wesley's trial demonstrates both the power of speaking up and the difficulty of doing so. Each woman had carried her trauma alone for years, convinced that she wouldn't be believed, that she was somehow to blame, or that speaking up would only cause more pain. It was only when they saw the news coverage of Keeley's murder that they found the strength to add their voices to the case against Wesley. Their testimony was crucial not just for securing Wesley's conviction, but for revealing the true scope of his criminal behavior. Without their willingness to relive their own trauma in service of justice for Keeley, Wesley might have successfully portrayed himself as a young man who had made one terrible mistake rather than a serial predator who had been attacking women for years. The case also highlights the importance of believing victims when they do find the courage to speak up. Each of Wesley's earlier victims had been young, vulnerable, and likely afraid that they wouldn't be taken seriously if they reported their attacks. The shame and self-blame that predators deliberately cultivate in their victims had kept these women silent, allowing Wesley to continue attacking others. For Keeley's family and friends, the knowledge that Wesley had attacked others before killing their loved one adds another layer of grief to their loss. If his earlier crimes had been reported and prosecuted, if he had been stopped before September 2019, Keeley might still be alive. The what-ifs and might-have-beens are part of particular torture that comes with losing someone to preventable violence. Monique Riggin, Keeley's best friend who had urged her to stay the night instead of walking home, carries her own burden of survivor's guilt. Her instincts had been right. There was danger in Keeley walking alone late at night. But neither she nor Keeley could have imagined that the danger would come from Wesley himself, from the very person who was supposed to provide protection. The image of Keeley's excitement about her job interview, her plans for the next day, her dreams of becoming a teacher, makes her loss even more poignant. She wasn't just living in the moment on the night she died. She was actively building toward a future she would never see. Her degree, her preparation for the interview, her excitement about helping children learn. All of it was cut short by someone who saw her not as a person with dreams and plans, but as an object for his own gratification. The park where Keeley died, once perhaps a place of childhood play and innocent memories, became forever changed by the violence that occurred there. The pond where Wesley hid her body, the branches he used to try to conceal his crime, the rugby club he used as a pretext to lead her away from safety. All of these locations became part of a crime scene that would haunt everyone who loved Keeley. Wesley's multiple returns to the scene of his crime speak to a mindset that is difficult for most people to comprehend. While Keeley's family and friends were desperately searching for her, while her father was filing missing person reports and her uncle was combing through parks looking for any sign of her, Wesley was methodically returning to where he had hidden her body, adjusting the branches, making sure his crime remained concealed for as long as possible. The fact that Wesley was able to maintain his helpful facade even while participating in the search for Keeley demonstrates a level of psychological compartmentalization that is both fascinating and terrifying. He could look Keeley's parents in the eye and express concern for their missing daughter while knowing exactly where she was and what had happened to her. He could offer to help with the search while working to ensure that his victim would never be found. This ability to separate his public persona from his private actions had served Wesley well throughout his years of attacking women. He had learned to be the kind of person that others would defend, the kind whose crimes would seem unbelievable to those who knew him. When accusations did arise, there would always be people ready to say that the Wesley they knew could never do such things. The judge's description of Wesley's lies as carefully crafted and tailored to fit the evidence captures the calculated nature of his deception. This wasn't someone who panicked after committing a crime and told clumsy lies to cover his tracks. This was someone who had thought through his strategies, who had considered what evidence might emerge and prepared explanations for each possibility. As Wesley serves his minimum sentence of 30 years in prison, he will be in his 50s before he even becomes eligible for parole. The young man who thought he could take whatever he wanted from others will spend the prime years of his own life locked away from society. But no amount of time served can undo the damage he caused, can bring back the life he took, or heal the trauma he inflicted on multiple victims. For Keeley's family, the justice system has done what it could, but as her mother said, no outcome would ever be enough. The legal process could assign blame, impose punishment, and ensure that Wesley couldn't hurt anyone else. But it couldn't restore what had been lost. It couldn't give them back their daughter, sister, and niece. It couldn't fulfill the dreams that Keeley had carried, couldn't teach the children she had wanted to help, couldn't live the life that had been so brutally cut short. The story of Keeley Bunker stands as a testament to the preciousness of life and the devastating impact that one person's evil choices can have on countless others. It serves as a warning about the dangers that can hide behind familiar faces and trusted relationships. Most importantly, it honors the memory of a young woman who deserves so much more than the 20 years she was given, who should have had the chance to become the teacher she dreamed of being, who should have grown old surrounded by the love of family and friends who will never stop missing her. In remembering Keeley, we remember not just the tragedy of her death, but the brightness of her life, the dreams that motivated her, the kindness that defined her, and the impact she made on everyone who was lucky enough to know her. Her story may have ended in darkness, but her memory continues to shine as a reminder of all that is good in the world and all that we lose when evil is allowed to triumph over innocence.
Wesley, you need to listen to me. Right, it's moment in time. Give us a rest. Your suspicion of murder. Okay, you don't have to say anything. It may harm the defence if you don't mention my questions until it's in court. And if you do say, maybe give it evidence. Okay?
Now, when you say you're going to take my phone, now I feel like you're blaming me.
No, we haven't.
home.